All right, let's talk about the menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle, typically 28 days. Okay. Day one would be the first day of menstruation. And again, remember for pregnancy, that is going to be the first day that is used to calculate when the pregnancy began. Your period might be considered irregular if it comes more frequently than every 21 days, or if your cycle is longer than 35 days, or if your cycle length varies greatly. So 28 days, then 35, then 21. Okay, if it varies greatly. That doesn't mean there's not on average some variation, because there is. But a normal menstrual cycle, normal, is 28 days, but that can range from 21 to 35. So if you're outside of that 21 to 35, your period might be considered irregular. Why does the menstrual cycle happen? Well, every month the body prepares for pregnancy if you have a uterus. If no pregnancy occurs, the uterus sheds the thickened lining and then restarts the cycle and prepares again. So every month the uterus is like, are we going to get pregnant? No? Bleed. Are we going to get pregnant? No? Bleed. Okay? Who goes through the menstrual cycle? People who have a uterus, vagina, ovaries, and they may or may not look like what you expect them to look like. But that's irrelevant. There are so many changes that happen during the menstrual cycle. So we have thickening of the lining, we have an egg being released, we have hormone levels jumping, we have different hormone levels dropping, we have changes in body temperature. Not to mention the bleeding piece. So a lot. The menstrual cycle is divided into 4 phases. Now, the menstrual phase, the first phase, is technically part of the follicular phase, but I'm going to separate it out and talk about each of those separately. So we have menstruation that begins each cycle, then follicular, then ovulation, then luteal phases. So stage 1 is menstruation. The uterus sheds the inner lining. There's menstrual blood flow. What is menstruation? Also called menses, a period. It's normal vaginal bleeding as part of the monthly menstrual cycle. It includes blood and tissue from inside the uterus. How long does menstruation last? Typically 2 to 7 days. It can be altered by birth control, so the time frame can lessen. It typically stops during pregnancy and during a chunk of chest feeding, for that matter. But your cycle could be long, your cycle could be short, your bleeding might be heavier, might be lighter. There's lots of things that play into a period. It's just important, if you are a person who gets periods, to know what your normal is. Okay. Now, there may be a misconception that all period blood is red. It's not entirely true. So, bright red, most likely at the beginning of a cycle. Darker red might be nearing the end of the cycle. A pink or lighter flow could be at the beginning or at the very end. Okay, so if you have different colors, they may or may not indicate something is wrong. So like grayish, for example, could be bacterial vaginosis. If it's black or very dark, it could be simply the beginning or end, like a very, very dark brown, but it could also indicate a vaginal blockage. Okay, so it's important to understand the color. Also, not all period blood is the same consistency. So there can be clots, it can be stringy, it can be gritty, it could be slippery. It's important to know your normal, and things that occur out of the normal are things that maybe to talk to some medical professional about. What do people use during their periods? Well, one option is a tampon. There can be tampons with or without an applicator. If you get a tampon without an applicator, so that would be this type of tampon, then you're going to kind of pull it apart like this and then insert it using your finger to get it situated in the correct part of your vagina. Other tampons like this have an applicator. The applicator might be plastic, might be biodegradable, might be cardboard, but it's going to be the same idea. We're going to pull out that bottom piece to extend it and then insert the tampon inside the applicator, then push the bottom part, and that will insert the tampon into the correct location. Tampons come in different sizes. Okay, so there's light, there's regular, there's super, there's ultra, and you can see the size of the tampon increases, and the amount of fluid it can absorb then also increases. There are also pads. So there are some reusable pads that can be washed and reused. There are pads that are thinner. There are pads that are thicker. There are pads with wings. Okay, there are pads meant for light flow, pads meant for heavy flow. So pads come in different sizes too. Again, liners typically don't have wings, although they can. And then there are pads that have wings. They usually get larger as the amount of blood flow they can absorb increases. One thing that should be noted right here, the wings. So on the back of this part, you peel off, and you're going to stick that on the inside of the undergarment, and then the wings will fold over. It helps to hold the pad in place, also to eliminate any blood from the edges of the undergarments. This shows a great tip for people who might have a heavy flow during the day or at night, how to use a second pad. There are other options too. So there's a Diva cup. There are other brands of it, that same idea. There's also underwear, so similar to reusable pads, but these are simply reusable underwear that you can use. Besides bleeding, though, there are other signs and symptoms during menstruation. There's pain. So cramping could be in your abdomen, your back, your thighs. There could be spasms. It could be dull. It could be achy. It can be considered at times as painful as a heart attack. Other period symptoms can include bloating, breast tenderness, diarrhea, irritability, a whole lot of stuff. All right, now we move into stage 2, the follicular stage. Now remember, technically menstruation is part of the stage, is happening at the beginning. So what happens in the follicular phase? Well, one follicle is going to mature into an egg. Now in reality, some follicles start maturing and then the perfect one is chosen to continue the journey. And then the rest, they don't get reused. The growing follicle is going to stimulate the lining of the uterus to thicken. Hey, get ready, an egg is coming. Stage 3 is ovulation. So what happens during ovulation? A mature egg bursts from the ovary. Now, this can be painful. And many people who have periods also will notice a pain about midway through their cycle, and it typically varies. So one time it's on the right side and then it's on the left side. It's kind of this cramping mid-cycle. So if you've ever noticed cramping mid-cycle and you're someone who has uteruses and has periods, it could be ovulation. Then the egg is going to be picked up by the sweeping motion of the fallopian tube, and the egg is going to start traveling down the fallopian tube. Stage 4 is the luteal phase. So what happens during the luteal phase? Well, the lining of the uterus, that endometrium, thickens. And you can see it's caused by a huge increase in the amount of progesterone. Now, in this luteal phase is where PMS symptoms happen, so premenstrual symptoms. So this is going to happen before your period. So this is happening in the luteal phase. And that jump in progesterone, which I talked about, it can cause a whole bunch of symptoms like mood swings, cramping, soreness, food cravings, breast tenderness, joint pain, depression, fatigue, anxiety, lethargic, weight gain, a whole host of symptoms that can be part of premenstrual symptoms. Then the cycle is going to continue again with menstruation. And then we repeat over and over from the time of puberty until the time of menopause. So, it could be about 40 or so years of someone with a uterus's life. And that's the menstrual cycle. I hope you learned something new today.